Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the literal household of our planet. We're going to unpack some highly structured concepts to decode exactly how life on Earth operates, survives, and thrives. So if you've ever wondered about the hidden rules governing the natural world all around us, you are in the right place. Let's dive in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to define our environment, explore ecology as our planetary household, look at adaptation and survival, map out the ecological hierarchy, find our niche, and finally, check out the ecosystem engine.
All right, section 1, defining your environment. So let's start with a really basic question. What exactly is your environment? The word actually comes from the French environner, which literally means to encircle or surround. It's the totality of absolutely everything that surrounds or affects an organism during its entire lifetime. It's the whole shebang.
And when we say everything, we really mean everything. Sure, it's the natural stuff, like the atmosphere, the soil, and the oceans, but it's also human-made structures, right? The roads you drive on, the building you're sitting in. Plus, it completely includes the human elements themselves, your family, your local economy, your community, your political situation. They all encircle you. They are all, by definition, your environment.
Moving on to section 2, ecology, the planetary household. Now, how do we actually study all these complex interactions? That's where ecology comes in. German zoologist Ernst Haeckel coined this term way back in 1866. And I just love the etymology here. It comes from the Greek eikos, meaning household or place to live, and logos, meaning study. So ecology is quite literally the study of our planetary household and how all of us residents get along with each other.
But studying an entire planet is a pretty massive undertaking. So we break it down using two different lenses. First, there's autoecology. Think of this as pulling out a microscope to zoom in on just one individual organism, or a single species. Then on the flip side, we have synecology. That's swapping the microscope for a wide-angle lens so we can understand the interactions of entire groups or communities. You really need both of these perspectives to get the full picture.
Which brings us to section 3, adaptation and survival.
Because here's the thing, nature never stops changing. And standing still? Well, that's just not an option. To survive, organisms absolutely have to adapt. Adaptation is simply the biological mechanism organisms use to adjust to new environments, or to handle unexpected shifts in their current one.
And it is incredible to see how this physically plays out in the real world. Just think about how two closely related animals evolved completely opposite structural adaptations to survive extreme temperatures. You've got the desert fox, which developed these enormous ears that basically act as biological radiators to dump excess heat. And then you've got the Arctic fox, which evolved tiny ears to do the exact opposite, retaining as much precious body heat as possible. Same basic animal, totally different engineering based on where they live.
But adaptation isn't just about structural engineering, right? Organisms have a whole toolkit for survival. Physiologically, you have creatures like kangaroo rats, equipped with ultra-efficient kidneys so they can survive the desert without ever drinking liquid water. Behaviorally, think of emperor penguins literally huddling together to survive the brutal Antarctic winter. Over the long haul, as Darwin and Wallace mapped out, this process of natural selection drives evolution over entire generations. Because, honestly, if they don't adapt, they face the ultimate biological tragedy, mass extinction. Which, to put it into perspective, means losing over 3/4 of Earth's species in a tiny sliver of geological time. No pressure, right?
Okay, section 4, the ecological hierarchy. Let's zoom out a bit and see how all this life is actually organized. It builds up kind of like a giant set of nesting dolls. At the very base, you have the organism, one single living being. A group of those genetically related interbreeding organisms makes up a species. Put members of that same species together in the same place and time, that's a population. But populations don't exist in a vacuum, so different interacting species in one area form a community. Add in the non-living stuff, like water and rocks, and boom, you have an ecosystem. Group those into major geographic units to get biomes, and stack all of that up to form our entire living biosphere.
But here is a cool little quirk of nature. There are rarely sharp, clean borders between these ecosystems. Instead, we get these fascinating transition areas called ecotones. An ecotone is basically a zone of tension created by abrupt environmental changes. And because they sit right in the middle, they usually have a much higher density and diversity of species than the bordering ecosystems themselves. It's like the bustling, marshy area where a river meets the ocean, just bursting with a unique blend of life.
All right, section 5, finding your niche. Now, to make sense of how animals fit into this massive hierarchy, we need to clear up two terms that get mixed up all the time: habitat and niche. Think of a habitat as an organism's address. It's simply the physical area where it lives, and lots of different species can share the same address. But a niche? That is the organism's unique functional role. It's their specific job description or resume within the community. And the golden rule here is that no two species can occupy the exact same niche in the same habitat. And fulfilling that niche is way more complicated than just what do you eat. To carve out a functional niche, a species has to check a bunch of very specific boxes. It's where they live, sure, but it's also exactly what they eat and who they compete with, their specific soil and topography preferences, how and when they reproduce, and their distinct biological tolerances for temperature and moisture. By locking down this hyper-specific combination, species make absolutely sure they aren't directly competing for the exact same job in our planetary household.
Let's bring it all together in Section 6, the ecosystem engine.
We've been throwing the word ecosystem around, so let's formally define it. Sir Arthur George Tansley first used the term in 1935 as a quick abbreviation for ecological system, and this was actually a massive shift in thinking. He introduced it to emphasize that the living community and the physical environment aren't just sitting next to each other. They actively interact and operate together as one single, highly complex functional unit. Just think about the incredible complexity of this interplay. You have the living, or biotic, components, like fungi, insects, plants, and animals, constantly interacting with the non-living, abiotic elements, like sunlight, heat, water, and soil. They are completely, totally interdependent. The living organisms literally cannot survive without the non-living elements. And we can organize those non-living building blocks into three main categories that basically set the rules for the whole system. First, there are physical factors, like sunlight and rainfall. These sustain growth, but they also limit it. Then you have inorganic substances, like carbon dioxide and soil, which act as strict limiting factors for life. And finally, crucially, we have organic compounds, like carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. These are the absolute key, the physical building blocks that actually link the non-living environment straight into our biological living systems. Once you have all those pieces in place, the ecosystem engine just starts humming along through these core functions. Energy flows through the food chain, though, interestingly, the amount of energy actually drops at every successive step up. Meanwhile, nutrients are constantly being recycled. The whole system grows and develops through succession, maintaining balance via homeostasis and feedback loops. But here is the critical takeaway. Every single ecosystem operates on a strict, finite energy budget that physically cannot be exceeded. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought for today. We've seen that our environment is literally everything encircling us, defined by constant adaptation, fierce niche specialization, and strict physical limits. So as our own human activities rapidly alter this delicate planetary household, how will you adjust your own role? How will your niche adapt? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.